All right. Hey, everyone. Glad to made it to my talk. My name is Mo. I'm the lead designer at Mimimi. I'm not 12 years old, as you might think. I'm 31, actually, to get that out of the way quickly. I hope there's going to be two key takeaways you have from this postmortem for Shadow Tactics. It's a design-focused postmortem, so maybe you learn something about game design or our approach or what not to do. And you will definitely learn that I'm a horrible artist because I drew through the whole thing because I like doodles. But you'll have to sit through that now, I guess. All right, so let's jump straight ahead to the release day of Shadow Tactics. This was the team on our release day, which coincidentally was the same day that the German Developer Awards were held, and we were nominated for many of them, and we won many of them, and we got very drunk, and it was like going up the stage, getting an award, coming down, checking the Steam sales, being like, yes, and going up again, and getting very, very drunk, and everybody was very happy and supposed to be very, very happy, but there was a big dark cloud hanging above us, because we knew that likely the studio would not exist anymore in 1 month of time. And that was because during the development, there were multiple reasons for this. The time of development for Shadow Tactics was scheduled to be 18 months, and we realized that we would need more time, like 3 more months was what we needed. And so sometime during development that became clear, and we had to put our own money into that. And these were the savings we had to sort of survive until the next project would roll in after Shadow Tactics. And we had multiple projects lined up for that, and they one by one kept breaking away, as things can happen. And so we stood there and we made the decision as the whole team, saying, okay, do we put those 3 months into the game and go out with a very nice game, maybe? Or do we not do that and feel bad about it for the rest of our lives, maybe? So we made the hard decision to say, okay, this might be the last game we're making, but we're going to make it the best game we can, and pulled all our money into it. And so most people on that picture were basically terminated at that time. We knew that we would not be able to work together if things went wrong, except for everybody who was involved in the console ports. They would have to stay. And hopefully we would have made a new project in that time, but it was a very bad feeling, of course. Luckily, our CEO worked his ass off during that time, and he came through and made a very good deal, a follow-up deal. And of course, publishers always wait a little bit when they release a new game to see how it's doing, and Shadow Tactics did well, so we managed to get a deal. And on 23rd of December, he sort of wrote us the email when everybody was at home with their families that things are fine, we're going to be alive. And this was in January, where we sort of met in the center of Munich. We're from Munich, Germany, and burned all the paperwork, and again, got very, very drunk. So this is all I'm going to say about the business, whatever side. The rest is going to be design. I hope that you know Shadow Tactics. If you don't, this might be see, I'm not a very good artist. If you do not know Shadow Tactics, I'm going to quickly explain it, but this talk might be a little boring for you. So in Shadow Tactics, it's a stealth game from a top-down, isometric, whatever perspective. And you're playing as a gang of 5 characters. It's playing in Edo, Japan. And basically, there are huge maps filled with hundreds of enemies, and you have to combine the skills of your characters to sort of get through there and take out all the enemies, or ghost your way through, which is a lot harder. The main mechanic we use for that is sort of a vision cone thing, where you have a bright area and a dark area, and in the bright area you always get detected, and in the dark area you can crouch through it and feel stealthy like a ninja. And if this is familiar for anyone, this of course is all ripped from Commandos, which is our big inspiration, the Commandos series and the Desperados series. But this is a quick disclaimer now. I love those games, and if I'm going to say anything bad about the old games, it's purely analytical. I'm not trying to make them look bad, okay? So, except for some of them, they were not that good. So, this is Commandos 1. It's the add-on for Commandos 1 is our favorite game of the whole genre, and the genre died about 10 or 15 years ago, and we sort of had to find out why before we made another entry in the genre, because maybe people just didn't want to play this anymore, right? We had to find out. So we played the games and we dug into feedback and all that, and it pretty quickly became clear that the height of the genre basically was after Commandos 1 was released, there was Commandos 2 and Desperados 1, which are very good games, and this was sort of the best moment for real-time tactics. And then everything started to go downhill. And for each of the series, it was something different. For the Commandos series, it was that they wanted to go more cinematic, and they always had an affinity for movies. The Commandos 2 is full of movie missions. They're sort of like movies. And in Commandos 3, they pushed that quite a lot. They had things like parachute troops coming in and things surprising you and everything being cinematic and scripted. But that's not really what you want in a tactical game, right? You want to be able to not be surprised, to sort of deduct everything that's going on, know what's going on, especially in a genre like this, and they sort of lost that by going very cinematic. And the Desperados series went into some weird things where you could go into first person and start shooting people, and that just went very horribly. And for the nail in the coffin basically then was Commandos Strike Force, which was a shooter game. I never played it. I actually don't know if it's bad or good, but people were very angry about the game because it wasn't what they wanted to have anymore. And so we realized the genre didn't die because people don't want to play it anymore. It was because there was nothing for them to play. And that's when our idea of shadow tactics became a lot more real, and we knew what we had to make. And we also knew that we had to make the game like Commandos 1, 2, and Desperados 1, and not the other games. So let's get into shadow tactics. These are the characters we have in the game. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of them. On the left, you have Mugen. He's sort of the big, brutish samurai guy who can take out multiple enemies at once. Next to him is Aiko. She's a kunoichi. She's a female ninja. She can disguise and then walk freely amongst guards, which is very powerful. And Aiko and Mugen sort of have a thing going. Then in the center, we have Hayato. He's the generic archetype ninja dude with a shuriken. And he's very versatile and agile. Next to him is the fan favorite, I guess. Her name is Yuki, and she lost her parents in the war and grew up on the streets, and she's a little bit crazy, but in a funny way, so that's why people like her, I guess. And then we have Takuma, who's sort of, from a mechanical standpoint, the oddball. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And on his head, it's Kuma. That's the pet tanuki he has. It's his distraction. So I think that characters are the area where we most succeeded in the game. They are the most important part of the game, and the decisions we made really worked out, so I'm going to talk about those a little bit. When we looked at the old games, we identified two problems they had with their character design. The first one is this guy. This is the driver from Commandos 1. And anyone who played Commandos 1 might know what I'm getting at. The driver was used for one thing only, and that's driving vehicles. And you don't drive many vehicles in Commandos. So what would happen is you would take your cool characters like the Green Beret, clear the whole map, feel awesome with the Green Beret, everybody's dead, and then there's a car, and then you're like, the driver. And you pull the driver, the whole map up, and he just gets in the car and drives off. And so he's like a key, right? He's not a mechanically interesting character and not someone you use very much. He's just a key. So this sort of became a design term for us, like characters shouldn't be drivery or the driver. He's the epitome of failure for us in character design in these games. And the next one, I'm going to teach you a German word today, one that is very German. There you go. It's eierlegende Wollmilchsau. It's a typical German thing. I'm going to translate that literally for you. It means egg-laying wool milk pig. This is my interpretation of an egg-laying wool milk pig. It's an animal that does it all, right? And in the Commando series, there's usually one character in every game that does it all, the Green Beret. He can carry bodies, he can use his knife to kill guards, he has a great distraction. And we thought, that's pretty cool. We want all our characters to be eierlegende Wollmilchsäue. So that's what we did, basically. We developed a system where every character would have a certain type of skill, and it was important that each of them had one. The main first thing, of course, is the melee kill. Each character has one, and you can already see that Takuma sort of is the oddball because he has a grenade, which is not very stealthy as a melee kill, but whatever. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. And they are all basically the same, but we changed the balancing so that, for example, Yuki, who's not very good at this sort of thing. He has a very messy kill animation. It takes a very long time, so you have to use her differently. But it's important that they all can do it, right? Maybe someone is better in a certain situation, but they all can do the melee kill. The next skill is very important. It's the special, as we call it. And this is sort of the skill that describes what the character is. And if you talk about the character, when I described them to you previously, this is what you talk, right? If you tell a friend, this is the type of skill you're going to talk about. For Hayato, it's the shuriken. For Yuki, her trap, that she can lure people in. Mugen, the sword wind attack, where he just obliterates everyone around him. It's not limited to 3, what people think. You can kill all the guards on the map with it. Then we have Aiko. She has a distraction as that skill, which is rather special. It's the disguise ability, and the snipe ability of Takuma. And while people might think that this is the most important skill for a character, it's actually not. It's the most important one for the vision of a character. But for gameplay, the most important skill is the distraction, by far. Because the distraction is the skill that you use to interact with the system of the game, right? The kill is just a kill, it's very binary. But with the distraction, you can sort of break up the enemy setups and draw guards away and sort of I had to say a bad word there, sorry, can mess with the setups that we build. And it was very important that the distractions felt different because they really define how you play a character. This is the most important skill a character has. Just to give you a simple example, if I use Yuki's whistle to whistle a character away, it doesn't really matter if I kill him with a shuriken, if I stab him, if there's a trap, if there's a Mugen doing his sword thing, it doesn't matter, right? The important part was that I could draw him out with the whistle. So they are actually the most important skill in the game. Each character has a gun. And I'm going to quickly talk about the role of guns in the game. Many games, and also the old ones, the Desperados and Commandos, did something where they had infinite ammo, and you could basically start shooting at any time and just draw all the guards on the map to you and just kill them. And we didn't like that, and we also realized that we would never be able to create good gun gameplay mechanics and good stealth mechanics at the same time. So what we decided was that we will just not do shooting and shootouts in a big way, so our guns are more like stealth guns. They have a very small range of audio or noise, so people don't hear them as much, but you have very limited amount of ammunition. And the role is basically that if you're stuck in some sort of setup and you don't know what to do and you just can't figure it out, you just use your guns, shoot everyone in that one setup, and then you can move along. So it's basically a joker or a small cheat that you have. And they all have a health pack, but whatever. So the important part about this was that we made a system where every character has each type of skill. And the one that is most driver-like, I guess, would be Takuma, because he can't carry bodies, he cannot climb, he cannot kill anyone, but he's extremely powerful aside from that. All of his skills are very strong. The Tanuki is the strongest distraction in the game. The grenade, the normal one is not as good, but you can switch it to a stun grenade, which is completely overpowered. And yeah, the snipe is just strong. All right, so that's enough for characters. I'm going to do sort of a deep dive into one game design topic between each of these broader topics. It's supposed to be a warp vortex, but it looks more like a snail, I'm sorry. All right, for this one, I'm going to talk about shadow mode, which is a prominent feature in the game. Something that's very important to us is that you're playing a team, right? This was one of the pillars we had. You shouldn't feel like there's individuals running around. It should be like a team that is working together, because this sort of is different from any stealth games where you're just by yourself usually. And so what we thought of in the beginning is that we make team actions, which would be like two characters working together and creating this new skill. And this would be true for every character. Every character combination would have their own team action. Desperados did that in one of their sequels. It did not work out for them, and I know why now, because we tried it as well. The problem with this is that team actions add a lot of complexity to the game. It's hard enough already I mean, every character has two skills you have to learn, right? The distraction and the special. And that is hard enough for people already. It would take them a long time to really get the hang of how to use a character. Now imagine if we add 5 to 10 skills on top of that are just very situational. You can't even use them all the time, and you have to try to learn those and really use them. That was not going to work. And the second one was that we had a couple of good examples for team action. For example, we had the idea that Aiko could use Mugen sort of act like he's her husband and sort of shuttle him through enemy vision because they wouldn't think he's suspicious. Or Mugen could bunk up other characters and help them climb like a ladder. But it sort of stopped after that, and we would have needed 10 or more. So yeah, we scrapped that. And we did the planning mode thing. That also existed in Desperados. It was a little hard to use because the controls were not as tight, and they are for us as well. But the idea behind the planning mode, is, if you don't know it, is that you can plan one action for each character you have, and then have them executed at a later time, together or separate. And this is very important for gamepad controls. We knew from the beginning that we're going to do a console version, so we worked on gamepad controls from the beginning. And it is very different because you control the character directly, right? It's very immersive in that case. So on a computer, you could simply just send a character somewhere and do something else with another character, but on a gamepad you can't, like, because you have to control the character yourself. So shadow mode becomes very important if you're playing with the gamepad. And what it turned out to be is sort of a do-it-yourself team action. And it was brilliant, because we didn't have to teach you any new skills. You could basically use the skills that you already knew, combine them, make the game feel like a team game, and voila, everything worked out well. And I think this is also some of the most powerful moments in the game are when you pull off a successful shadow mode, so that worked out well. And something that often comes up is the question why we only have one action that you can save, and why not infinite actions? It would be so much cooler. We actually had that and during development, and it had a couple of problems. It was pretty awesome, I have to admit it. Like, if you saw people just doing these insane things where they would make insane queues and chains of, I throw a shuriken there, I walk over there, I use my stone, the shuriken, I pick it up again, the cooldown goes, and they would do insane things and basically clear parts of the whole map just in shadow mode. And that was fun, but that's not how we want you to play our game. In our game, a very important aspect is the real-time aspect, and it's the aspect of execution. You cannot just plan like in a turn-based game, but you have to execute as well. And if shadow mode is that powerful, you don't have to execute anymore. You just plan it, and you look and see what happens. And the other one was that the more complexity the feature had, the more tools players wanted to work with it. So they wanted timelines where they could rearrange the actions they had set, or they wanted a pause function where they say, you walk there, and then you wait 3 seconds, and then you do this action. And that would have been a nightmare from all sort of standpoints. So we didn't do it. And the lesson we learned is that less is more. Wow, big lesson. I guess nobody heard that before. But the big part that was new for us was the fact that what we actually had was fun, right? It was not something where you just have this huge pile of features where a lot of stuff is added on and somebody's coming, yeah, you should do less, that would be better. It was fun, it was a very good thing, and there's games who have this planning mode thing as their main mechanic, but it just wasn't our game, so we had to cut it out, and the game's better for it. Let's talk about level design. I could talk a lot about that. It's going to be rather short, though, because there's a lot going on in this talk. This is mission 8 of the game, and as you can see, the map is very big. You are this big. If you can't see it, this is you. And so what is very important if you have a mission where people spend 1 to 4 hours on is that the mission is cool. As soon as the mission is bad or boring, they're probably going to stop playing your game because they know they have to spend a couple of hours on that mission. And they also have to be very unique, and this is sort of the first big thing that we wanted to do, and this is something that Commandos 2 does the best, I guess. They have very unique settings and great maps, so we took that inspiration. And the idea is basically that you can, if you and a friend have played the game, this is sort of a test you can make to see if your maps are unique. If you can describe to them a mission with 1 or 2 words, and they know which one you're talking about instantly, then it's probably unique enough. And the important thing about this is that we did also not want you to get into a new map and realize it's the same thing again, and you know you have to play that for 2 hours now. So that was very important that things look differently. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later when I talk about pacing. Another big thing was the emotional state that we want you to be in if you play a mission. This is very high level, but it's important to know that, like, if you want to be consistent. So if you open up the mission, you're very, very happy. Everything is new, it's looking gorgeous, you're scrolling over the whole map, you're like, oh wow, this is beautiful, look at that landmark, look at this nice building, look at this. And then it sort of dawns to you that you have to actually play all of this, and you see things like, oh my god, there's 3 samurai over there, there's a huge patrol of guys, how am I ever going to... And you want to quit, but then you're like, okay, no, I can do this. I've bet certain missions before, I can do this one as well. And then you enter in the emotional core loop of our game, which is basically utter despair into happiness, into I can do this, and many quick saves, and maybe rage quits in between. And in the end, you feel like a god. You're in the purple cloud of puffiness, and you're very happy. And the big thing is that you can scroll over the whole map that you have actually just completed and see everything that you've done. And this is important, and this is very, very good, and we want that. We could have done more in that department, I think. We could have added, like, to the stats screen some sort of replay function where you can just see what actually happened, and you did this there, and you did that. That's something we're probably going to do for our next game, so yeah. But this is very, very important, and giving you that feeling of satisfaction in the end. So basically, every mission is the same as doing a small setup, right? And I want to talk about openness a little bit. And one of our key pillars in the game, or level design, was that you should be able to play it your way. Everybody should have the chance to play different things, and every puzzle had to play different approaches. And this doesn't only apply to the small enemy setups, but also to the whole map. This is mission 5. It's the first mission that we built. It was sort of our vertical slice. And I think it's one of the best, which is awkward, because we didn't learn much, I guess. But in the beginning, it's very linear. You get up to this gate, and then the mission basically opens up. And you can go left or you can go right. And the briefing tells you this, right? It tells you there's 2 paths. And something that's very important if you're designing for openness is that you actually show players the paths. If you have 20 paths, but they're all obfuscated, and you're like, yeah, the player has to be clever and find them, then they won't look and they won't find them, and they won't realize that this is an open game, and they will think it's linear. So what we always try to do is something like this T-shape, where we say, okay, you can go left, you can go right. And also be aware of the fact that you are not losing content if they are not playing the other part. The choice is only meaningful because they don't get to play the part, right? If they would end up in the same thing anyway, there wouldn't be a choice, and the game wouldn't feel open or good at all. Plus, you can always have replayability. If the player chooses to play this mission again, they will choose the other path and have a completely different experience. And there also are obfuscated paths in this mission. You can just go straight ahead and climb up the building, but most people don't find that. But it's cool, because if you replay it, you might find that. You might feel clever. You don't tell it to you in a briefing, and we do that sort of stuff a lot. I want to talk about bottlenecks, because if everything was very open and you didn't have any bottlenecks, then the game would be very boring, especially ours, because people could just sneak through everything and leave everything behind. So how do we do bottlenecks, and how do we make them still fun and not feel frustrating? So the first thing that we do is basically bottlenecks always revolve around Takuma or Mugen, who cannot climb or swim, and so you always have to drag them through, sort of. And in this case, this is the bottleneck. You have to get Takuma to this sniper tower on the left, but he cannot swim, so he has to go over that thing. And what's important here is that while it is a bottleneck to get Takuma there, you have infinite possibilities with your other characters on how to solve that thing. You can swim around the whole island, you can get out anywhere you want to, and approach the setup in a very, very open way, and there are multiple solutions to it. So it doesn't really feel like a bad bottleneck where you're like, I have to do this now. It still feels open, and you can be creative. So yeah, that's enough for level design. Let's do another deep dive thingy. Something that we learned, which is also pretty obvious, I guess, for many people, but is about how people approach problem solving in your game. So we have a player, and the player faces a problem. In our case, usually a setup of some guards. And there is this assumption players have on how they are approaching a problem in our game, because it's called Shadow Tactics. It's a tactical game, right? You have strategy. You're in this view, in this RTS view, where you can see everything. So people think that they're actually approaching problems very holistically and checking everything out and then narrowing it down and then starting to work, but that is not what they're doing. In reality, they do this. They see a guard, and this is the circle is sort of the tactical horizon, the things they actually see. And they just go in and kill the guard, and then they get seen, and they quick load. And they see, okay, this guy is in there, so they add that guy to their horizon, sort of. And they keep doing that over and over until they have actually understood how the setup works. And it is very important to understand that, because they might tell you that they are playing very strategically, but they are usually not. I'm sure that many people are, but many weren't. And what this meant for our level design was that we had to make sure that things are not too far away from the center of attention that you're actually playing in. For example, we don't have large patrols that are going like many minutes around the map, because that would just be bad. You would play the game, and then suddenly they would come in and screw everything up for you. And we try to have guards close to each other. And this doesn't work all the time, but we tried doing that. And another thing we did here was that we cleared off the areas very clear. So you cannot see from one area into the other. You can always rely on the fact that if you are in one area, guards from another area will not disturb you, at least most of the time. So the lesson we learn here is that what people tell you about how they approach problems in the game is not really true. And we thought about why this is the case in our game, and it's very clear we could have seen that from the beginning, because Shadow Tactics is very iterative, right? We teach you to quick save all the time, so there's basically no punishment for failure. The game screams that at you. It's like, just try things out. The quick load time is very low, just keep going. And of course they don't think holistically and watch everything, because they don't have to, right? And it's in our core mechanics, and we could have seen that earlier. Story. I'm gonna drink something real quick. So the most important rule we had for our story was that the plot is not important, but the characters are important. And the plot had to work with many, many restrictions from a game design and level design standpoint. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. So it's structured very simple, and it had to facilitate certain things. It's basically the Shogun is fighting Kage-sama, who's this ominous bad guy. You don't know who he is. And the important part here is that the Shogun can send you anywhere, because we have these missions where you're on a mountaintop, it's winter, oh, you're at a lake, it's summer, and it's impossible to tell a story that feels like a journey very much if you have a structure like that. And that's what I talked about with the different settings before, that we want every map to feel fresh and new. This is a big hit for the story, right? You cannot do certain things then. And that's why and also the characters that you have in a mission are not defined by the story. They are very much defined by the pacing, so the writer can't just say, yeah, I want this character to be here, because he will not be there. So we did this mostly in cutscenes, the plot thing. Between the missions you get a cutscene, and that's that. But the more important part of storytelling that we had is about our characters and how we talk about them. The first thing we do is we have something like we call context dialogues. It's sort of a dialogue that either triggers if you walk into a volume with the player character, or if you do an action, you kill a guard, whatever, then these banter things trigger. And they are very weird, because we're in Edo, Japan. This is very early, and they sort of have Skype. They can just talk to each other over the whole map. And some people are offended by that, and they don't like it, but realize that people want your characters to talk to each other, so they will have a high suspension of disbelief if something like this happens, if you do it right. And we had certain things that we had to change and had to work into the game that would make this less awkward. For example, when a character walks into a trigger volume and one of these dialogues triggers, it's always that character that starts talking. So every dialogue is written in a way that there's a beginning line for each character in the mission, and then the dialogue will go on. And this way it feels less awkward, because sort of you are initiating the dialogue, and it's not someone screaming at you from 400 meters away. And this worked out really well, I think, and we got a lot of character things across with that, and the personalities. And the other one is, we call them player barks. Barks are many things, so you might not call them that at your studio, but it's when you select the character, and what they say when you use a shuriken or whatever, this work, yes my lord, stuff from Warcraft 3 would be an example of that. And we try to use that for storytelling in something I haven't seen as much, and I wonder why, because it's like the best way to do it. Something very bad happens at some point during your story, and after that, for 2 missions, we sort of completely swap the dialogue lines your characters say if you use them and make them walk around or use skills, because they're depressed, right? Because it would be very awkward if you have like a depressed dialogue where he's like, oh my God, I'm so sad, this is so bad, and then you select him, he's like, yes sir, I'm gonna do that. It doesn't feel right? And I think we could have done a lot more with that, use that, changing this stuff up a little more. We did it a little bit with, there's a snow map, they might say things like there's snow in my armor, but I think from an emotional standpoint, this is a very underused tool in RTS-like games that you can do very much with. Pacing. I'm realizing I'm talking very fast, so I might slow down a bit. I don't see much about pacing, so this might be very, very basic, and you might get bored now, but it's an important thing to me and also for our game, so I wanted to talk about it. And if anybody of you is into that stuff, like pacing of the whole game, talk to me. I want to learn. I want new things. So Shadow Tactics is about 25 hours long. And the biggest fear I had all the time was that people would get bored halfway through, because there is not very much in the game, actually. We have 3 enemy types, right? And they're basically all the same. They just react differently, but they don't have different weapons or huge different behaviors. In the beginning, we had concepts of guards like that would maybe gun around with torches and sort of burn the bushes you're hiding in, and ninja characters that hide in bushes, and we cut all of that. Nothing of that made it into the game. So it's very simple, and we only have 3 guard types. So it's not much variety coming from that, right? Then we have 5 characters, but we introduce them in the first third of the game, and they do not change at all. There is no progression, there is no leveling up, there's no skills that you can choose. It's just the same character from start to finish. So how are we going to keep the player interested for 25 hours or more? And the first big thing we did is that we invented sort of, well, we didn't invent them, we stole them from Commandos and so on, but we had these high impact features that completely changed the gameplay, the core gameplay. And one of them is nighttime, where the lights become very important, the shadows become important, which is something that is irrelevant on most maps, on day maps, I mean. And then you have the footprint mechanic, where snow is lying and guards can see your footprints and they will follow you up. And this really changes how you play a mission a lot. And we had these two things. We thought about others, like adding fog of war maybe to some missions, which sadly never made it. Something I want to try, but there's technical limitations with that. And it's difficult with fog of war and the view cone, right? Because the guard, you cannot see the guard, but he can see you. So that would have been very bad. So we did this thing, and we paced these out very carefully. I'm going to show you that in a minute, and we tried to not overuse them. And then we have some sort of story high points in a mission, where they're usually, mechanically, the missions where we have these big assassinations, like you kill Koto, you kill Yabu or Kage-sama in the end. There is not much going on from a mechanical standpoint. We don't introduce new features there. We don't introduce new characters. They're just like, you learn stuff, now use it and kill this guy, but you have an emotional high point there because it's story-wise, it's pretty cool. So this is important for pacing as well, especially balancing these two things against each other. We had these graphs that I sadly didn't bring because I thought I would be a lot slower and didn't have time for it. So basically the idea was that we have these high impact features like this, or introducing a character, and we would assign a value to that, right? And then we would see in every mission how many high impact features are there, how many medium impact features are there. For example, puddles that you can go into that make a noise. They don't change the game completely, but they change it up a bit. And so we get this value, and then we can make a graph out of that and see how much is going on from a mechanics standpoint in every mission. It's good for tutorial stuff and also just to see how the pacing turns out. And then you base that against how the excitement of the player is when he just opens the mission, or if the story does something crazy. So you balance these out with each other, and then you get a nice pacing. So this is the Excel file we used. It's actually pretty simple. There's not much going on, but I still want to just go over it. Probably you guys have much more complex stuff, but we'll see. This is the settings stuff I talked about earlier. As you can see, we tried to paste them out. There is a bunch of village settings in the middle, but they are very, very different. One of them is very it's raining, it's a very bad mood. One of them is the 5th mission I showed you before. And they are sort of, yeah, they're different, so don't get fooled by that. You can see there's the moon down there, which I might show you at the end. And yeah, we tried to be very careful with the settings to paste them out in a way that it always felt fresh and you didn't play in the same area or the same visual style for too long, and never one mission after the other. This is the night and the snow gameplay. You can see we don't use it that often, and we usually pace it at a point where you don't get a new character or anything else. If there's not much going on, then we introduce something like snow, or we introduce something like the night gameplay in the lake village. And we do this once, twice, and then once and twice again, and then we have a mission with both. And that's it. We don't try to push it, we don't try to overuse it, because then the feature would get old and boring. And this is the most important thing we had for pacing. It's the characters that you have in a mission. And people always want to choose their own characters for a mission. They want to be like, yeah, this would add so much depth, right? I could choose the game and play the game in very different ways. But what would actually happen is that normal players would just stick to what they know. They would just choose the character they like the most, and then the game would get boring very quickly. So it's very important that we have the power to sort of, you have Hayato, 2 missions, and you get used to a skill set, and boom, we take him away. And you have to sort of deal with that. And that is the most important tool of pacing we have. And if you can find something like that in your game where you sort of can control how the game plays extremely well like this and then use that feature, it's the best thing you have. And what you can see is that we have only 2 missions that actually have the same character setup. So, well, you can't really see it because it's very confusing. I had to count that like 5 times myself to not lie to you, but it's only these 2 missions. And next to that, you can see the mission objectives. We try to balance those out as well, that you don't have like 3 assassinations missions in a row. And while they mostly are the same, that you always have to get to some point and do something, it's still important that the vision and the feeling the player has is very different in each mission. And on the right, you can see some playtime. We also put, like, the thing is a lot bigger. I just cut it down. And this is the first playthrough and the second playthrough from the team, whatever. It's not really relevant. So the last deep dive I have right now, it's about one of the most important features in the game, which is the quick save. We were very, very afraid regarding the quick save because we thought that it's a very old school type of thing, it's very retro, and we didn't know how, especially reviewers, would react to it, right? What they think it's bad design, that we didn't really do our job properly because you don't do that anymore, right? The save scumming thing. And we got afraid, and we sort of thought about features that we could implement that would sort of remove the quick save. Like, we knew we would have it, but we tried to make it less important for a long time during development. And an example for this is like the biggest story of design failure we have in the game. It's called freeze mode. It never shipped, obviously. And we worked on that for about a year, I think. And we had so many iterations. The basic idea was this. Once you get seen, we don't want you to quick load. We want to give you a second chance, right? You can maybe just keep playing. We don't want the game to end because especially Commandos 1 was very, very brutal in that regard, and it's not that much fun for many players. There's some who like that, but they can play on hardcore. And the idea was that once you get seen, the game freezes, freeze mode, and you can choose that you can teleport somewhere. The idea was sort of that the ninja is using his smoke grenade and just disappears into thin air, which is a pretty cool move. It had multiple problems. The first one is that if players get seen in our game, they usually get very excited and they start clicking really fast and try to get away or something. And this is not when you want to freeze the game and force them to do a controlled input, because they will not. They will just click through it and then they teleported somewhere and they don't know what happened and they were very frustrated. We could have fixed that, I guess, through input stuff, but the basic principle of if someone is agitated, you force them to make a controlled input, that just doesn't work. And we had that problem for all the iterations of the feature. And the second big problem was, I have to mention, by the way, that many of you might think, well, why didn't you just put a rewind time feature in the game? That would solve all the problems. We talked about that, and then we realized we cannot do that because it's very hardcore from a technical standpoint and would take a lot of our budget, and also we didn't want a rewind time mechanic just to facilitate the quick save thing, right? We would have needed a lot more mechanics to work into that and make it a game about rewinding time, like the games about rewinding time are. Yeah, but back to the problems with the freeze mode. So the first problem was that, as I said before, people just clicked through it. And the second problem was that it added just a lot of complexity and possibilities to abuse, because people would get seen in it, and then they would try to teleport somewhere advantageous for them. So they would sort of skip part of our gameplay and get seen on purpose, which is definitely not what you want. So we had to fix that in a way, and we made many iterations of that. At some point, you could only teleport back on a line where you would have been walking before and just sort of go back. But none of it worked, and it always had the same problems. And so we ended up just, yeah, cutting the whole thing. Well, we didn't cut the whole thing. We were going down this rabbit hole of adding new stuff, changing stuff, changing. We didn't really see what was going on anymore. And at some point, our creative director came by, and he was like, guys, we should fix this. And so we sat down in a room, and we walked out of that room with a simple realization that we just put a slow motion there. Because the slow motion does everything we want, right? It gives the player time to think. When they get seen, it doesn't really screw everything up completely, so they can still think and react. But it also isn't making it so they feel like this was a sort of fail-safe, because that was a problem with the previous systems as well. Players they were not bulletproof, right? There were situations where you would get seen and there was no space where you could teleport to safely. And if you put a system in your game that screams at the player, well, I'm gonna save you, but sometimes I don't, then that's not a good idea. And the slow motion doesn't do that. The slow motion just says, okay, you have some more time before you get detected, so use that time. And it worked very well, I guess. So back to the quick save. This was sort of the point where we realized that we should maybe embrace the idea that this is a game about quick save and not try to obfuscate it. So we added things like the quick save timer. This is a timer that pops up after 1 minute of gameplay and sort of screams at you and says, like, 1 minute, right? We want you to save often. And screams at you and says, save the game. And after 2 minutes, it gets orange and screams even louder. And it just you can turn that off if stuff like that annoys you. But we could have done that a lot more hardcore, I think. Many people just don't see it anyway. But we did sort of stuff like this, right? We went into that route of embracing the quick save. And if you play the tutorial of the game, you just walk around and there's some quick save tutorials popping up all the way. I think there are 6 in the first 5 minutes of the game or something, because we realized it's important. And the lesson that we learned from this was basically, if this is part of the core of your game, you just embrace it. Don't try to push it away, because this will always fail, right? You cannot remove it from the core from your game. It's the core. So embrace it, and then people will love it more, because you're being honest about what your game is. And that quick save reminder thing got a lot of positive feedback from press and from players. They were like, this is so cool. I've never seen this before. And it's just such a simple thing. We only did it because we at some point realized that this is our game, and we have to do that. So I am going to, like, in the beginning I was thinking about showing you something or making questions, but because I talked so fast, I can do both. So first, thank you. You can reach me through these channels to chat or whatever. I'm going to first show you something, and then if you have questions, we can do that. This is going to take some loading time, but I hope it's worth it, because I brought the old prototypes of Shadow Tactics. So you're going to see the moon. No. This is going to take a while, so I'm just going to talk. So during development, we had 3 prototypes that, oh, that's wrong. 3 prototypes that we made that were, there we go, that we sadly had to cut because, as I told you, we couldn't barely finish the main game. Oh, by the way, the performance is going to be horrible because my laptop isn't good, but it's not a problem. Yeah, we had to sadly cut those DLCs. This was the first idea that we had for how you should enter the game, and everything would be on this map in a planning mode. It's very ugly, of course, because this is alpha, right? This is our alpha milestone. And okay, let's see the moon. We had 3 DLCs. One of them was a ship DLC, whatever. Then we had a story DLC, which was pretty awesome. The idea was that the characters get together in a tavern and they drink and get drunk, and they talk about stories of missions they had. And you sort of have it a little bit like Bastion, where you get back in time and you play and they talk over it. And the twist idea behind that was that Mugen is talking about the easiest mission he ever had, where you play as Mugen all the time. Wow, beautiful UI, right? You play as Mugen all the time, but all the other characters sort of worked around him and cleared that up, and you get to play both of those. But this is the bigger DLC we had. It's the moon. So the pitch behind the DLC was that, let's see, yeah, there we go. That Space Shogun is trying to sort of carve his face into the moon so you can always see his face at night, because he was very egocentric, I guess. And our characters didn't like that, so they decided to take a spaceship and kick his ass, basically. We wanted the DLC from a business standpoint to explain what the hell is going on here. And we wanted a DLC that could make press, like that was very crazy, and where people were like, oh wow, like if you release it a couple of months after the game, they were like, oh, I'm going to get back into Shadow Tactics, they have the moon, right? That was sort of the idea behind it. And yeah, you can see it's very janky with the performance. Then we had some ideas like, what can you do in space? We reverse gravity, so you can only jump upwards and have to take ladders to go down. This was very bad. We cut that from we made 2 versions of this map, and we cut that in the second one because it just wasn't intuitive and it felt completely stupid. Then we have like drones flying around, you can see here, making light. So there was some cool stuff going on. This is, by the way, we had all the assets built for this. They just weren't textured. There's a lot of game designer, level designer art in this. So in the center, we have this huge shield, and there's this crane thing that they're using to sort of laser the face of the Shogun. You're basically in one of his eyeballs. This is the huge crater that you're in. And you could kill him in 2 ways. Either you could kill him by sort of luring him beneath this laser and killing him there, or you could go over there and kill him using drop pods that you could call down, and the alarm guards would come in drop pods. There's a lot of cool stuff. You can see I'm a bit sad that we didn't get to do this. Yeah, just wanted to show you that because I guess it's fun. It never saw the day of light, so maybe in the next game we'll do a Moon DLC. All right, thank you. So if you have any questions, then you can ask me.
Hi, thanks, great talk, love the game. So as sort of a bonus question first, as a big fan of the genre, are we going to see a sequel, maybe in a different setting, like, you know, World War something. But the main question is, sadly, about the business part a little bit. Sure. As a gamer who was waiting for the revival of the genre, because it seemed to me, I was aware of the game since its announcement, because I was hoping for it. But it seemed like initially the game got very little visibility, maybe from the publisher as well, and sort of after a while became this cult hit that people knew was very good, that it started selling. That's what at least the Steam Spy data seemed to suggest. The community kind of exploded. People started talking about it. So if you can share anything about that part, that would be interesting.
Sure. So regarding the first part, we actually, it's a small anecdote, but we have time. We went to Barcelona to visit Pyro, or at least Gonzo, who was sort of the director of the first Commandos games, and he played Shadow Tactics, and he loved it very much, and that was very important to us, and we were very happy about it. But the Commandos IP is a very difficult IP to get, so that is most likely not going to happen. And regarding the second question, so yeah, we're not good at marketing, and marketing is hard, and you need a lot of money or clever ideas, I guess, to do that. And we knew that the game was very good, and for some reason it didn't get traction very much. We had a very early trailer, but it wasn't very good, so that didn't do much. And I think the biggest marketing asset that we actually had was the demo. Like we said, there's a free demo of the game, and we released that 1 or 2 weeks before the game, and that's when it sort of started to kick in. But then again, it takes a while to play, it takes a while to get into, so press would also, they didn't really release reviews on the first day because we didn't send it to them early enough, I guess. Plus, there was things like The Last Guardian coming out that some people might have been waiting for, or Final Fantasy 15, small games. They don't directly fight with our game, but still. And so I guess that word to mouth was basically the main thing that helped us then. The game was good, and then people talked about it. You could always tell your friend that, hey, there's a free demo, right? You don't have to buy it just because I tell you. You can always get the demo and you can start playing. And I think this is the biggest, best thing we did for marketing that probably helped elevate the game in the second and in the long run, because they could just play it and you can try it. One tip regarding demos, if you're doing a demo for PS4, be sure that it's a demo and not a trial. They have this weird thing where if you make your game and you can basically upgrade the game to the full version, which we thought was pretty cool, then you don't have to download it again or whatever. It's a trial, and it will not be visible in the demo section. It will actually not be visible anywhere. So don't do that. Make it a demo, which might suck, but yeah. Thanks.
Hi. So I lived in Japan for over 15 years, and because of that, I tend to be a little bit allergic to media that portrays Japan from in the West, right? And I've been really impressed with the game, including like the voiceovers and all that. And so I'm wondering, how is it you got it so right? I mean, do you have somebody from Japan on the team, or how did you do that?
Yeah, that was a big process. We did not have anyone from Japan on the team, but we had someone who studies Japanese culture from Munich. We had him come over and check out the game and give us mostly feedback on stuff like the way they talk to each other, or visual stuff like how much stone did they use when they built their houses, and we did a lot of research into that. And it's not that easy because it's way back, and then it's also Japan, so you don't find as much here, but we try to do a lot there. One of the biggest topics of discussion we had for a long time was if wagons had 2 or 4 wheels back then, and how that was an ongoing thing. So yeah, this is the level of detail you get down to at some point. And yeah, it was tough, and I'm glad that you say that we did it well, because you never really know. Because if you ask a Japanese person, they will tell you yes, but maybe not, because they're very polite. And we are actually releasing it in Japan as well now, so hoping to get some more feedback there regarding that topic. Yes.
Hey, so great game. I'll finish it one day since it's pretty big. But hypothetically, if you were to do a sequel, how would you handle the number of characters? Because right now it seems that the number of characters is quite good for the challenges that you have. And it seems that if you added new characters, you would have to add specific challenges just for that new character to the formula. So in what way would you look into expanding the features of the game, where it would be environment, enemy focused, or actually character focused?
So we like the number of 5 characters, so we will be sticking to 5 characters for our next game as well. we are actually developing a game that is like Shadow Tactics right now, so this is not a secret yet, but it's not Shadow Tactics 2 though. So it is a very difficult topic for us to see how we want to change the thing up and how we want to keep it that way, because we don't want to take away too much from what made the game great. We also don't want it to feel like a simple copy-paste thing, and that is very hard to do. So our current approach is that we have characters that are similar to the Shadow Tactics characters, and we have characters that are completely new. But it's still 5 characters, so we had to take some of the stuff out that we had in Shadow Tactics. And we also try to do stuff with the environment, as you said. Like this is, I can't really talk about the feature yet, but it's pretty cool. It's about how you navigate environment and make the maps feel more real, like real places. This is a big thing that we're trying to focus on in the next one. Hope it works. Yeah. Anyone else? No? Yes.
Awesome talk, thanks.
Thanks.
Oh, that sounded weird. I have 2 questions, if that's cool. One, so swimming seems extremely powerful. Like, what were the sort of conversations that led to it being that way?
Well, in the beginning, we had systems where you could hold your breath only for a certain amount of time, and then we realized that this was very complicated and weird because we had to make behavior for the guards shooting into the water and what they would do if they see you in the water, because they can't really react to that. And then we decided, well, we just use the small things, the straw things to bamboo for the ninjas to breathe underwater. It's very ninja and very cool, and just have infinite thing. And the water is powerful, but we try to use it clever in level design. So we know that you can always get away through the water, but it's balanced in a way that you will usually take 1 hit from a guard before you get into the water. So this was sort of a way of balancing that. Yeah.
Cool. And secondly, what were the triggers that determine when the music changes?
Well, it's just rather simple environment triggers that we place in the environment, or level events when we say, okay, you have killed 2 or 4 of the 4 guards you have to kill, and we are adding new layers to the system. We actually have some pretty cool audio stuff going on in the game. For example, if you perform the tracks are very basic, but if you perform an action with one of the characters, each of them has an instrument attached to them. And if you sort of do something with Mugen, you will have these kodo drums playing something. Whatever it is. If you do something with Hayato, I don't know what his instrument is. Yuki is a flute, obviously. So you sort of, nobody realizes that it's in the game, but you're sort of building the soundtrack by playing the game through these stingers that we have. And yeah, the audio guy, Filippo, shout out to Filippo, he's great, and he did a great job on it, I think.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Any more? No? Cool. Then thanks so much for coming out, and think of doing the rating thing. This is my first talk at GDC. I would be very happy if you guys rate it. Thank you.